Henry stepped outside with a cup of coffee, expecting the usual morning calm, only to find his mother's van gone. The street was still dressed in its quiet morning best, porch lights blinking out one by one, newspapers folded into neat triangles, a squirrel darting across the cul-de-sac with a stolen piece of bread. It was the kind of hour when nothing urgent usually happened. But the space in front of the house was bare. No van. No ramp. No slow whir of the lift that Henry had come to expect every Thursday morning when his mother left for book club at the senior center. He stared at the curb for a beat too long, the mug in his hand still steaming. The early October air carried the scent of pecan leaves and cool brick. Down the street, Mr. Darrell waved from his driveway but paused when he noticed Henry's stillness. Henry didn't wave back. A pale HOA flyer was still taped to the side of the mailbox, fluttering slightly. It read, Aesthetic Reform Week, in a delicate script font, followed by a list of vague promises like visual harmony and neighborhood continuity. There was a cartoon tulip at the bottom and a quote attributed to no one, "Beauty inspires unity." Henry peeled it off without a word. Inside, the kitchen smelled of cinnamon toast and peppermint tea. Lillian sat at the table, her hair pinned up, wearing her Thursday cardigan with the loose button on the sleeve. She glanced up from her crossword and saw his expression before he spoke. "What happened?" "It's gone," he said. "The van?" He nodded. "Towed." Her hand trembled slightly as she set down her pen. "But we park there every week." "I know." He reached for the landline and called the tow company. A clipped voice confirmed, vehicle ID ending in 49GZ, authorized by Clear Pines Homeowners Association, removed at 6:42 a.m. due to a nonconformity with revised visual code. It had been taken to a private lot 15 minutes away. He thanked them curtly and hung up. Lillian sat quiet for a moment, then said softly, "It must be a mistake." Henry didn't answer. He drove her to retrieve the van an hour later. It sat behind a chain-link fence, flanked by sun-bleached traffic cones. The man at the gate didn't ask questions, just took the $185 and handed over the keys like it was a package from the post office. Lillian didn't say much on the way home. The ramp lowered with its usual gentle whine, and she wheeled herself back up the front walk like always, but slower. That afternoon, Gloria Whitmore appeared. Her SUV was parked perfectly beside the clubhouse, gleaming like a catalog photo. Vanity plates, W Guide. A pastel HOA sticker on the bumper caught the sun. She strode up with her clipboard cradled like a tablet of commandments. "Oh, Henry," she called from the sidewalk, her tone bright as chime bells. "Morning. Isn't it just lovely?" Henry didn't respond. His arms were crossed, one hand still holding the flyer. "We're refreshing curbside visuals this week," she explained cheerfully. "Streamlining some of the outdated markings. It's been such a hit with the board." "That spot was for Lillian," he said. "We've used it for 7 years." "Well," Gloria said, flipping a page, "the board found that some markings weren't part of the updated plan. Technically, it wasn't on the latest overlay." He blinked. There was a sign. "It was faded," she said, with the kind of sympathy reserved for things you were glad to throw away. "Besides, we're relocating accessible options to the west end of the block. There's a charming little nook beside the maintenance shed. Quiet. Out of the way. There's no ramp there." She offered a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We can't accommodate every preference, Henry." He studied her for a long moment. "Did the board vote on this?" "We're embracing flexibility," she replied sweetly. "And evolving into a more cohesive vision. You'll see, everyone benefits." Then she glanced at the shrubs near their porch. "Also, your hydrangeas are encroaching past the trim line. Just a smidge." "I'll take a look." "Wonderful." She beamed again. "You'll find a courtesy note in your mailbox." She turned on her heel, her flats clicking with precise confidence, and walked back to her SUV. It purred away without a trace. Henry stood still. A breeze stirred the porch chimes into a soft, sour harmony. Inside, he found Lillian at the window, stirring her tea with careful circles. Glenn Miller played faintly from the radio behind her, the same playlist she'd favored since before her knees gave out. Her medication organizer sat on the table, Monday through Friday already opened. He pulled something from the door, a notice printed on pink cardstock. Vehicle relocation, HOA compliance notification. No signature at first glance. But when he turned it over, he found it, Gloria Whitmore, in a swoop of cheerful penmanship. No vote. No warning. No chance to speak. Lillian looked down at the cup in her hands. She hadn't touched her tea. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "If this is too much." "It's not." She hesitated, then said, "Do you think I'm a burden, Henry?" He gently replied, "You're the reason I stay." Back from the impound lot, Henry dropped the $185 receipt on the counter, then opened the HOA handbook. The binder was heavier than it looked, more for show than substance. He flipped past pastel section dividers marked Yard Standards, Paint Harmony, and Seasonal Decorations. The spine creaked as if protesting the idea that anyone would read it. Lillian sat quietly at the breakfast table, folding and unfolding a paper napkin. The drive back had been quiet, and she'd barely looked at the van once they'd pulled into the driveway. "Did they say how long it was parked there illegally?" she asked, not meeting his eyes. "They didn't say anything," Henry replied, still skimming pages. "Just that it didn't match the new visual code." He paused at section 4.3, Curb Aesthetics. A paragraph outlined permitted driveway finishes and lawn edging options. Nothing about designated accessibility markings. He flipped another page. Section 5.1 addressed Community Flow. Still nothing. Lillian shifted in her seat, looking toward the wall where an old photo hung in a wooden frame, her, standing beside the van back in 2016, one hand on the handle, the other waving toward a group of neighbors gathered around a folding table of pies. The ADA lines were clearly visible behind her, still crisp, bright blue against the curb. Henry followed her gaze, then rose to retrieve the frame. He set it beside the handbook, silently comparing the image to the pages of vague legalese. He went out to the garage, his de facto office, and retrieved the brown box labeled Newsletters, HOA, Miscellaneous. From the middle stack, he pulled out a folded bulletin from 7 years ago. The corner was torn, and the ink had faded, but the picture remained, a community barbecue, and there in the corner, again, the van parked beside the clubhouse. A short caption read, "Veteran Parking, Lot 12B." He underlined it with a red pen, drew a small asterisk, and wrote next to it, "Check lease." The garage smelled of old cardboard and lemon oil. Henry wiped his hands on a rag and headed back inside. "I'm going to Pinecone," he said. Lillian nodded. "Bring me back a slice of that sour cream pie if they still have it." Henry smiled faintly. "If Cheryl hasn't claimed it." The bell above the door at Pinecone Cafe jingled as he stepped inside. The vinyl booths were cracked at the corners, patched with duct tape that matched the color, mostly. A small jukebox blinked idly near the counter, its buttons long faded by years of fingers pressing A5 for Patsy Cline. Cheryl spotted him instantly. "Well, if it isn't my favorite silent type," she said, already pouring coffee. "Still 2 sugars, no cream." "Same as always," Henry replied. She slid the mug across the counter, followed by a paper menu she knew he didn't need. "I've got 1 slice of sour cream left. Want me to wrap it or tempt you with a fork now?" "Wrap it." "For Lillian." Cheryl gave a knowing look. "That HOA still picking at you too?" He sipped. "They towed the van." She paused mid-pour for another customer. "What?" "Gloria said it didn't match the new color scheme. That woman would repaint heaven if she thought it clashed with her nail polish." She shook her head. "Sugar, you let me know if you need extra eyes." Henry gave a nod, then settled into the corner booth with his coffee and a legal pad. On the first page, he scrawled, "Lot 12B, HOA status?" Veteran use? Lease expired? Darryl slid into the opposite bench a few minutes later without asking. Saw you out there this morning, he said. Van was gone. It's back. Still wrong. They sat in companionable silence for a while. Cheryl brought over a refill without being asked and dropped a wrapped pie slice beside Henry. He scribbled a new tab on the side of the notebook, legal, possible violations. After finishing his coffee, Henry walked over to the clubhouse. The front door was propped open, music playing softly from a Bluetooth speaker somewhere inside. The lobby smelled like lilac air freshener and recently vacuumed carpet. A flyer was taped to the bulletin board, the new look of Clear Pines. It showed pastel shutters, soft-toned siding, and a tidy sidewalk. Near the bottom, a smiling resident posed in front of a flower bed that didn't look real. Afternoon, Henry. Gloria's voice chirped as she came around the corner, clipboard in hand. Gloria. She beamed. We're really excited about the community refresh. I noticed, he said. Do you have the original lease for Lot 12B? She blinked, just for a second, then laughed lightly. Oh, I'm not sure it's still on file. That's such an old arrangement. Most of those got rolled into the updated zoning plan. I didn't see it in the handbook. She tilted her head. We're in a transitional phase. Evolving, you know. Everything is being streamlined. Henry looked past her toward the window, where a small boy was using sidewalk chalk to draw an oversized sun with a smiling face. I think I'll make some calls, he said. Back at home, he sat at the kitchen table and dialed the zoning office. The receptionist transferred him twice, and he listened to a loop of soft piano jazz for 6 minutes before a young voice picked up. Zoning and Parcel Services. This is Natalie. Hi, I'm looking to verify parcel ownership for a lot in Clear Pines, Lot 12B. It's the one beside the clubhouse. I think it used to be under HOA lease. Natalie tapped her keyboard. Do you have a parcel number? No, just the lot designation. She hummed. Hang on. Let me cross-reference. Henry waited, tapping his pen slowly. Mr. Martin. Mr. Martin, Lot 12B isn't listed under any active HOA ownership. It was previously leased but hasn't been renewed. At least not with us. He paused. So it's unclaimed? In terms of zoning, yes. We show it as county-held, reverted status. Can you email me that record? Absolutely. He scribbled down her name and the case number. After hanging up, he walked out to the curb. The sun was low now, casting a golden sheen over the neighborhood. He crouched near the concrete where the van had once rested. The new paint was clean, sterile. But just below the surface, just barely visible in the right light, the old blue paint showed through, thin lines, dulled by time but defiant. Henry unrolled an old blueprint tube labeled Clear Pines, 2005 Development Plan, and spotted a hand-drawn ADA zone. The paper crackled under his fingertips, dry and a little brittle, smelling faintly of ink and dust. It uncoiled across the dining table with slow resistance, revealing a delicate lattice of lines, lot numbers, sidewalks, and shaded areas. In the corner, a penciled-in rectangle, 12B, ADA access, pending final signage. He exhaled slowly and reached for a manila folder, laying it next to the blueprint. A second later, he opened his notebook and wrote at the top of a fresh page, "What's still legally ours?" From the kitchen came the faint scent of banana bread. Lillian was humming something tuneless, the kind of melody you only remember with your hands full of flour. Her voice floated in with the smell. Your dad always said, measure twice, trust once. Henry smiled without looking up. He also said never let a smiling clerk rush your paperwork. The soft patter of rain began against the windows, just enough to tap but not enough to chill. It was mid-November in Georgia, gray skies, long shadows, and the occasional drifting leaf still holding on. The county records office sat wedged between the barber shop and a bakery that smelled of molasses and cinnamon. Its brick facade was faded but proud. A painted sign on the door read, "Parcel and Title Division, since 1953. Inside, a fan ticked slowly in the corner. Walls lined with shelves and battered file drawers reached almost to the ceiling. The room was quiet except for the shuffle of papers and the soft click of a keyboard. Natalie met him at the counter, a pen tucked behind her ear, glasses pushed to the top of her head. "Mr. Martin," she said, smiling. "I see you brought half your office with you." Henry tapped the leather folder. "I like to be thorough." She leaned over to look at the map. "You weren't kidding. That's vintage." Then her eyes widened. "Wait, this note here? ADA access on Lot 12B? That's in the overlay. It's from the development phase. I think they never filed the signage follow-up." Natalie scanned the map again, then pulled up a screen behind the desk. "Okay. So, here's what I can confirm. The HOA had a lease on 12B starting 2003, marked for veteran and accessibility use. That lease expired in 2018. Renewed? Nope. No extensions. No rollover clause. The land defaulted back to the county." Henry's brows lifted slightly. "So it's floating?" "Technically inactive," Natalie said. "But available. The county still holds it, no current claim, no open bid, no dispute." A voice from the back called out, "You looking at 12B?" Henry turned. A woman in her 60s appeared, cheerful, sleeves rolled. A sunflower-shaped pin sparkled on her collar. "I'm Miss Temple," she said. "Been here since half the cabinets had locks with skeleton keys. I pulled that parcel file when Natalie flagged it." She laid a thick folder on the counter, flipping through with gentle fingers. "Here's the original lease. Here's the default record, dated December 2018. And look at this, board correspondence with the original developer. Recognize that signature?" Henry leaned in. "Gee Whitmore." "Small world," Miss Temple said, offering a lemon drop from a ceramic dish. "This town runs on old paper and strong coffee." He chuckled, accepted the candy, and kept reading. "Here's the thing," Miss Temple continued. "The county is liquidating dormant parcels. If you want to file an intent to purchase, we have the form. It's one page, and I won't even charge for staples." Henry glanced down at the flyer tucked in his folder. "The one from 7 years ago." At the bottom, in faded but still legible print, "Veterans Parking, approved by board." "Let's do it," he said. She smiled. "Thought you might." She slid the form across the counter. Henry filled it out in block letters, careful and slow. Natalie watched over his shoulder, eyebrows raised at his deliberate penmanship. "I used to draft wiring schematics by hand," he explained. "Sloppy writing fried circuits." Miss Temple stamped the bottom of the form with a satisfying thunk. "Congratulations, Mr. Martin. That land's yours, pending final filing and no competing claims in the next 48 hours. He nodded once. "That'll do." Back outside, the rain had stopped. The sky remained overcast, but the air was fresh in a way it hadn't been for weeks. At home, Bing Crosby crooned, "Don't fence me in," softly from the radio on the counter. Lillian was pulling the bread from the oven, the scent rich and golden. She looked at Henry curiously but said nothing. He walked into the dining room, cleared space on the table, and laid down the folder. Then he reached for a new one, clean, unmarked, and thick-backed, and labeled it in bold block letters. Miss Temple slid the manila folder across the counter and said, "You just bought yourself a patch of Georgia quiet." Henry took it in both hands, the cardstock warm from her touch, the edges firm and precise like an old blueprint. She smiled at him as though passing down a family recipe, something handwritten, rarely requested, but preserved just the same. Outside, the air was crisp and clean, cinnamon-scented from the bakery next door. A barber 2 doors down was sweeping leaves off the front stoop, whistling a Glenn Miller tune Henry hadn't heard in years. As he stepped into the afternoon light, the manila folder tucked under his arm, Henry remembered Lillian's words from months ago, maybe a year, maybe more. She'd been watching the mailman and sipping her evening tea. "Someday," she'd said, not looking at him, "I hope this place remembers we were here." Back home, Lillian was on the porch with a dish towel across her lap, a small bowl of celery and onions resting beside her. She was chopping them slowly, precisely, the kind of task that took time and made her feel useful. "Smells like November," Henry said, setting his folder gently on the table beside her. She looked up, eyes soft. "Cedarwood and starch," she said. "And the stuffing's halfway done. Just needs to freeze." He nodded. "We'll have good leftovers this year." Inside, he cleared space on his study desk and opened the folder. A simple deed, signed and notarized. Attached were several sheets Natalie had emailed an hour earlier: ADA guidelines, construction ordinances, a zoning map with highlighted borders and a note in the footer: parcel CP-12B now listed as private property. Henry pulled a sticky note from the side drawer and wrote, "Stage prep begins quietly." He flipped open a fresh folder and wrote across the top in bold black letters, "Stagecraft." Then he set the county flyer inside, followed by the deed. Before closing the folder, he pulled a wood-burned plaque from the shelf. It was simple, block letters on pine, sealed with matte lacquer. He'd carved it last year and set it aside, not knowing if it would ever be used. Private property, no construction. That evening, with the sun dipping low and Lillian finishing the last Ziploc bag of frozen stuffing mix, Henry stepped out onto the lot and staked the sign in the ground. No fanfare. Just a quiet press into the soil, his boots steady as he tamped the earth. Fall leaves swirled around his ankles as he stepped back and admired the sign. A pair of squirrels darted across the far corner of the lot, chased by the wind. Across the street, Gloria stood beside two HOA workers in matching windbreakers. One held a clipboard, the other measured the sidewalk with a will tool. Gloria wore a blazer too bright for the season and tapped her phone between notes. She didn't wave. Neither did he. Later that evening, as Lillian set out 2 mugs of lemon tea, the good kind, with honey and just enough bite, Henry sorted through the day's mail. A flyer fell out, smooth and pastel. Clear Pines Pavilion, groundbreaking ceremony, Saturday 11 a.m., Lot 12B, Community Unity begins here. He stared at it for a long moment, then placed it squarely on top of the deed. He slid both into the Stagecraft folder and closed it with care. Lillian looked over from the sink, where she was drying a mixing bowl. "They still think it's theirs?" Henry didn't answer immediately. He lifted his mug, the World War II commemorative one from a vet fair in '92, and took a slow sip. "They'll know soon enough." Just then, his phone buzzed with a quiet chirp. Streamers danced in the breeze, Gloria held a golden shovel, and Henry stood beside a deputy holding a manila envelope. Lot 12B had never looked busier. Colorful flags flapped from garden stakes, plastic tables lined the curb, and a folding sign near the lemonade cooler read, "Clear Pines builds the future." In one corner, a guest book sat open, its first entry in looping cursive, "So proud to be part of this vision, Gloria." A hot cider stand steamed gently near the front row, its paper cups stacked neatly. Every folding chair bore a laminated HOA logo taped across the back. The pastel color scheme stretched even to the napkins. Gloria stood center stage, a clip-on microphone affixed to her scarf, golden shovel planted ceremonially in the dirt at her feet. Her smile was polished. Her posture impeccable. "I'm so honored to welcome you all," she began. "Today isn't just about a structure. It's about what we stand for: unity, vision, and the evolution of Clear Pines into a modern model of suburban living." Polite applause followed. Henry didn't join it. He stood near the front, Lillian beside him in her wheelchair, wrapped in a shawl and holding a thermos of sweet potato soup. Her presence was dignified, understated. She hadn't spoken much on the walk over, but she'd insisted on coming. Behind them stood Daryl, wearing his Korean War veteran's cap, and Cheryl from the diner with a half-smile and a tray of scones no one had touched yet. Ted and Elaine stood together near the cider, arms folded. The air was crisp, dry, bright with the kind of sunlight that made everything feel briefly more permanent. Gloria raised the shovel. Together, we plant the seeds of the future. Together, we build not just pavilions, but community. And just as she leaned down to pretend to dig, Henry stepped forward. Deputy Collins followed, tall and steady, the manila envelope tucked under one arm. He didn't speak yet. He simply waited, scanning the crowd, his badge catching the light. Henry turned to Cheryl earlier that morning and had said quietly, "I won't yell. The law's louder than I'll ever be." He didn't need to raise his voice now. Collins cleared his throat and Gloria glanced up, shovel still posed in the grass. "Yes?" she asked, still smiling. Collins spoke evenly. "Ma'am, before this event proceeds, I've been asked to review documents relevant to this land." Gloria blinked. "This is an HOA-sanctioned ceremony. We've used this lot for years. Birthday parties, the spring egg hunt. That's not under dispute," Collins said. "But the property known as Lot 12B is, as of last week, privately owned." There was a ripple in the crowd. Someone near the cider table whispered, "Wait, what?" Collins opened the envelope and held up a certified deed. "Ownership has transferred to Mr. Henry Martin. As such, any construction activity must have the consent of the deed holder. Which," he added, "was not requested or granted." Gloria stiffened. "This is a community event." Henry finally spoke. "Events are fine. Construction isn't. But we've always used this space," she argued, her voice rising, the mic picking up a sharp note. "Tradition matters." Lillian leaned forward slightly in her chair. "Tradition's not permission." Silence fell. The kind that sinks into people's shoes, into the spaces between folding chairs, into the soft clink of a cider ladle being set down. Gloria opened her mouth again, then shut it. Behind her, the HOA banner trembled slightly in the wind. Ted and Elaine exchanged a glance. Darryl adjusted his cap. Gloria stepped away from the shovel and walked slowly toward her SUV. She didn't slam the door. She didn't speak. The door clicked shut with the kind of finality that didn't need dramatics. Collins handed the documents back to Henry. "I'll file a copy with the town, just in case." "Appreciate it," Henry said. Residents began talking in low tones. Some glanced toward the sign Henry had installed days earlier, "Private property, no construction," while others stared at the empty grill box now pushed to the side. Cheryl walked over with a cup of cider and handed it to Lillian. "Still warm," she said. Lillian took it with both hands, her gaze steady. "It's not about winning." "No," Henry replied. "It's about remembering what was already ours." From a few feet away, Ted leaned in just enough to be heard. "We're not done." "Not yet." The community hall smelled of burnt coffee and tension. Every chair was filled, plus 12 people standing. The room was too warm for November, the old heater clicking on and off in bursts. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everyone in a slightly unnatural hue. A tray of oatmeal cookies sat untouched on the refreshments table, their edges curled inward like they, too, had given up. The banner at the front of the room read, "Clear Pines HOA, Community First." But the exclamation point felt like wishful thinking. Gloria stood at the podium, hands gripping the sides, her smile stretched tight. She wore her usual pale scarf and a brooch shaped like a dogwood blossom. "Let me begin by saying thank you for being here," she said, voice bright and brittle. "I know there's been confusion, and perhaps even misunderstandings, regarding Lot 12B. She clicked the remote in her hand, advancing a slide on the projector behind her. A bar chart appeared, vaguely labeled, Community Investment. "In recent weeks," Gloria continued, "some have questioned the board's intentions. Let me assure you, our only goal has been to beautify and unify." Ted cleared his throat loudly in the second row. Gloria hesitated. "Yes, Ted." He stood, holding a stapled packet. "This is the expenditure report from October. The one I requested be included in the meeting agenda." Gloria gave a carefully blank expression. We felt it wasn't relevant to this particular. It shows that over $7,000 of HOA funds were spent on pavilion materials, Ted interrupted, before the board verified land ownership. A low murmur spread through the crowd. Several people leaned forward in their seats. From the back, Natalie shifted slightly, a manila folder across her lap. She didn't speak. Yet. Elaine, sitting 2 rows behind Gloria, raised her hand. Yes, Elaine. Gloria asked, voice strained. Elaine stood slowly. In March, Mr. Martin asked during open comments whether the disabled parking spot near the clubhouse was being removed. Gloria's smile tightened. And I explained at the time. No, Elaine said, softly but firmly. You told me to strike it from the minutes. You said it would complicate the message. There was silence. Someone coughed. The bingo machine in the corner let out a sudden rattle, as if offended by the stillness. Gloria's voice lifted a note. Elaine, we streamline minutes all the time. Natalie finally stood. I'd like to submit this, she said, holding up a packet. It's an ADA compliance review based on Clear Pine's recent curbside changes. It outlines 5 violations, including the removal of a marked ADA space without resident notification or board vote. Gasps, small but audible. Henry hadn't moved. He sat near the back, folder in his lap, hands clasped loosely. He'd said nothing the entire meeting. Lillian sat a few chairs away, bundled in her shawl. She didn't speak either. But her gaze never left Gloria. Ted raised his voice. We're talking about funds spent without vote. We're talking about altered minutes. And we're talking about violating federal accessibility law. Gloria's hands gripped the podium again. This is a witch hunt. Elaine shook her head. It's accountability. Someone near the wall muttered, we didn't vote for any of this. Ted looked out at the room. I move for a vote of no confidence in Gloria Whitmore as HOA president. Elaine, still standing, spoke clearly. I second it. There was a pause. No one moved at first. Then a hand went up. Cheryl. Then Daryl. Then Ted's wife. Then, slowly, the rest. Row by row. Palm after palm. Even the neighbors who never voted on anything. Even Mr. Vaughn, who once abstained on whether to add a second trash pickup during holiday weeks. Gloria looked out at the crowd. No one smiled. No one nodded. She lowered the mic. She didn't say a word. She stepped away from the podium, gathered her clipboard with trembling fingers, and walked down the aisle. No one stopped her. The only sound was the soft shuffle of her flats against the linoleum. The oatmeal cookies remained untouched. By dawn, Gloria was gone. Her porch light blinked behind her like a farewell. No one returned. The moving truck had come during the late hours, wheels whispering over the pavement. By morning, only the impression of tire tracks remained, leading away from her driveway like the last lines of a sentence no one wanted to reread. Her mailbox hung slightly ajar, a flyer from the local dry cleaner flapping in the breeze. Across the street, Henry stood on his porch with a coffee cup warming both hands. The mug was one of Lillian's old favorites, soft green glaze, chipped near the rim, but sturdy. He watched the house grow still. No curtain moved. No final word spoken. Lillian joined him a few minutes later, wrapped in her rust-colored shawl, her hair pinned up but softer than usual. She didn't say goodbye, she asked, not unkindly. Left an email, Henry said. No apology. Just a sentence about stepping down. Lillian took a sip of her tea. Sometimes silence is the only honesty left. The streets of Clear Pines were lined with hand-cut turkey signs, some traced from kids' hands, others painted with elaborate feathers. Mailboxes were wrapped in orange ribbons. A chalk arrow pointed toward the clubhouse with the words, Pie Tasting Contest, written in cheerful capitals. But Lot 12B was the quietest of them all. Gone were the caution tapes and printed flyers. In their place stood a clean, open space with freshly seeded grass. A simple pathway had been poured along the curb, low, wide, gently sloped. It met every requirement without a single flourish. Henry arrived just after lunch that Monday with a modest bronze plaque wrapped in cloth. He unrolled it slowly, fingertips brushing the engraving. Then he planted it with care beside the curb, securing it with 2 bolts and a quiet nod. Reserved for caregivers and quiet heroes. No ribbon was cut. No photos were taken. But as he stood there, the breeze kicked up a swirl of leaves that swept across the lot and settled softly along the new ramp's edge. Tuesday afternoon, Natalie stopped by with a tin of cookies. "From my aunt," she said. She said no one should eat store-bought during Thanksgiving week. Henry accepted them with a small smile. "You're becoming dangerously useful." "I filed the updated parcel map," she added. "It's now listed under both HOA and municipal records. No one can question it again." "Good." She hesitated, then added, "You know, if you ever do want to serve on the board." "I've done enough," Henry said gently. "Time for others to lead." That night, Darryl appeared with his old push mower and made 2 silent passes across the edge of the lot. He didn't wave. Didn't speak. Just tipped his hat once before heading home. Wednesday morning, Lillian returned from book club with a smile in her eyes and a wrapped tin in her lap. "Cheryl made her pumpkin bread again," she said. "Said it was from the diner regulars." Henry helped her out of the van. The new spot greeted them, clean, marked, and quiet. Lillian wheeled herself forward slowly, taking in the smooth curve of the ramp and the bronze sign catching the morning light. She didn't say anything right away. Just looked at it. Then, without being asked, a neighbor passing by raised a hand. "Morning, Miss Lillian." She smiled, a little surprised. "Morning, Charlie." He tipped his thermos in her direction. "Good to have you back." Henry stood behind her, hands in his jacket pockets, watching the exchange. Back at home, the Glenn Miller station played softly from the kitchen radio. The smell of cinnamon clung to the air. The casserole dishes were stacked neatly in the fridge, ready for Thursday. As Henry reached into the mailbox, his fingers brushed against a brightly colored sheet of paper tucked between a grocery coupon and a local paper. It read, "Thanksgiving potluck, Lot 12B, Thursday at noon." No agenda. Just gratitude. He unfolded it fully and read it again. Behind him, Lillian sat on the porch, mug in hand, eyes half closed in the sunlight. He didn't call out to her. He just smiled and slid the flyer gently into the space behind the bronze plaque stand. The folding tables were mismatched, the pies unevenly cut, but the feeling in the air was the most balanced it had ever been. Lot 12B had never looked so right. Folding chairs circled up like old friends. Handmade centerpieces, bundles of pine cones and cinnamon sticks tied with twine, dotted the tables. Casserole dishes steamed beneath layers of foil. Hand-drawn cards in marker labeled every offering: Aunt Joe's stuffing, Daryl's cornbread, Colin's family greens, and Natalie's sweet potato cookies, not from a box, promise. The grass was still a little patchy in places, and the air carried the edge of a winter chill, but no one minded. Knit scarves and flannel blankets took care of that. Children raced around with sidewalk chalk, leaving behind crooked turkeys and a large smiling van drawn beside a heart. Lillian sat comfortably near the front, scarf tucked at her neck, cheeks rosy from the wind. Neighbors stopped to greet her, offering cider refills and asking after her book club. One boy brought her a slice of pecan pie and called her "ma'am" 3 times before bolting away, embarrassed. Henry moved quietly among them all, offering small smiles, accepting paper plates, and brushing leaves from folding chairs. When someone called out, "Speech," he raised his hand and shook his head, but Cheryl elbowed him lightly and whispered, "They earned one." He stood near the plaque, bronze, polished, catching the light just so, and looked over the crowd. Conversations quieted. "I don't have a speech," he said. "But I have a sentence." He paused. "We all deserve a place to belong." No applause. Not yet. Just a ripple of nods, like leaves turning together in the breeze. Then clapping began, light, honest, nothing forced. Lillian's eyes were wet when she looked at him. Deputy Collins showed up in a flannel shirt and jeans, carrying a sweet potato pie. "Made by my wife," he said. "But I delivered it, so I want some credit." Natalie arrived with her grandfather, a man in a tweed cap who used to run the zoning office, back when paperwork meant something. She introduced him to Henry with a proud grin. Ted and Elaine moved comfortably among the guests, helping kids with hot cider lids and resetting chairs when the wind nudged them sideways. Darryl passed around a photo of the original Lot 12B map, laminated and marked retired in red ink. Midway through, Jamie appeared on a video call, beaming from her apartment in Jacksonville. "Uncle H," she shouted over the noise. "You made local news. Veterans lot saved by quiet paperwork. It's got 70 likes." Lillian laughed. He always did prefer a paper trail to a parade. Jamie blew a kiss and waved before the signal dipped. Henry tucked the phone away with a smile. Toward the end, someone pointed toward the clubhouse. A new sheet of paper had been posted to the community board. Printed, signed, and taped beneath the monthly bingo schedule. It read, "Lot 12B shall remain protected space for accessibility and rest. Now and going forward. By unanimous board vote, it shall also be known as Lillian's Corner." Applause this time was different. Not loud. Not drawn out. Just full. Real. Lillian touched Henry's arm and whispered, "You didn't just win, you welcomed." As the sun lowered behind the rooftops, shadows grew longer. People folded chairs and washed out dishes at the spigot behind the clubhouse. Someone passed around to-go containers. No one seemed to want the day to end. Henry poured the last of his coffee into his thermos cup and sat quietly on the bench near the curb. The bronze sign caught the last rays of light, glowing faintly gold against the fresh paint. Wind brushed past. He said, almost to himself, "No one parks there out of fear now. Only out of kindness."